You're listening to Design Between the Lines, the only design and home furnishings podcast where we talk with the movers and shakers, industry innovators, and lifetime legends of the home furnishings industry. It's here that I get a chance to sit and chat with the influencers shaping the industry into what it is today. This episode of Design Between the Lines is presented by International Market Centers. IMC is the world's largest operator of premier space for the furniture, gift, home decor, rug, and apparel industries, and operates nearly 20 million square feet of world-class exhibition space in High Point, Atlanta, and Las Vegas. Today, we welcome two wildly successful High Point-based industry veterans, Brinson Christi Barbour. As the Vice President of Strategic Marketing for the Media Matters, Dawn Brinson is easily recognized for her big-picture approach to marketing. She has successfully employed 25 years of experience to assert her mastery in revealing the essence of her clients' companies and fostering the success of their brands. Christi Barbour, founder and partner of Barbour Spangle Design, can often be found delivering informative and high-energy talks centered on all things design and merchandising. Her expertise stems from over 2 decades of residential and commercial experience, and she continues to be an exceptional force behind all major home furnishings markets. Ladies, welcome to Design Between the Lines.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are glad to have you. I'm going to start out by asking a little bit of some historical reference from both of you. One is, Christi, what attracted you to the design industry?
I would say my journey was probably a little bit more organic. Although I grew up in High Point, I wasn't exposed to it as a child. I was one of those kids that rearranged my room often. So it was in me. I just didn't know it then. And in college, I had the good fortune to have a suite mate who was in the interior design program. And so I found myself in her room helping her with her projects and homework much more often than I liked to work on mine. And so after a couple of semesters, she suggested that perhaps I should consider changing majors, and I did. And that's when I started the interior design program.
Wow, so that meeting kind of energized the whole pathway you chose.
Absolutely.
That's
I wish I
amazing.
still knew her.
Well, Dawn, what great pathway brought you to the merchandising and marketing side of the industry?
Well, like Christi, I didn't come at it in a direct fashion. I was pretty oblique at it. Everything that I had done leading up to this had some sort of research, marketing bend to it, but I really hadn't identified that. It was actually Dr. Richard Bennington who put his finger on it for me. I was working at what was then High Point College, and his office was just down the hall from mine, and we were having a lot of conversations, and he said, "Have you ever considered public relations, advertising, marketing?" Because that was sort of what I was doing for High Point College at the time. Mm-hmm. And it just planted a seed in the back of my head that eventually turned into this long career that I've had in home furnishings marketing.
Well, you mentioned right there I'm guessing it's certainly an inspirational person in your career, Richard Bennington, Dr. Bennington at HPU. Christi, were there mentors along your pathway? Were there other possible inspirations beyond the first one you got to change your directions in college?
Yeah, I would have to give credit to the first person that I ever had a job with, and that was related to interior design, and that was Barbara Dalton. At the time, she owned Dalton and Associates, and I did an internship for her between my junior and senior year in college, and then upon graduation, she suggested a job path for me that I took, and shortly thereafter, probably less than a year, she came back and said, "Okay, now I think you're ready to work for me." And so I worked for her for several years, learning from her, and looking back on that experience, she was a great teacher, and I learned a tremendous amount under her leadership.
Well, Dawn, something about that, I know obviously Dr. Bennington, others in your pathway or career that kind of helped you find different path, different bends in the road, if you will, as you came this way?
Sure. Most particularly, there was a woman who was in the industry for a number of years as an executive consultant and a marketer. Her name was Linda Jones. She was the wife of Ron Jones, the CEO of Sealy and other companies. And she was sort of the second one to kind of see that the things that I was doing at the time could translate well into the home furnishings industry. And she really was probably my most ardent mentor once I got into the industry. And I really appreciated that. And then Ron was always there to help and answer any questions. And they were just instrumental in guiding, once I was in the industry, where I wanted to go.
Well, I know that you have design in your background. I know that you are currently the president of the local chapter of IFDA, correct? Congratulations on that. And ASID is in your life, and other. You've got a lot of little letters behind your name, I've noticed. But let me ask both of you, in your opinions, how does design influence the day-to-day quality of people's lives? How do you feel, as maybe even especially at this time of COVID, how has that become even more important in people's lives, the design that they deal with every day in their homes and commercial properties that you've done, frankly, and anything you're seeing your clients do as well? You're seeing them change things right before our very eyes in the last few months, the direction of the industry, designs, et cetera. Tell me a little bit about how you see this influence on the day-to-day lives of folks these days.
I think that people recognize and appreciate good design, even if they aren't able to articulate that that's what they feel from it. Good design, whether or not it's a glass or a cup or a beautiful room scene, creates this sense of calm and peace and harmony, I think, inside people. It's not something that often people talk about, although now the concept of wellness and good health is so important in design, and we're having those conversations both on an aesthetic side and also on a research side. But I think that good design is paramount to good health, especially good mental and physical health. And those who don't have access to things that are well made, well designed, well properly functioning, and also have some aesthetic quality, I truly believe that their quality of life could be improved with those sorts of things. Christi, what about you?
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, just sitting here listening to you, I was thinking about a class that I had in college on urban design and the studies that we did on people who had certain types of environments versus others and their quality of life, which I found really interesting. And so we talk often about the office about meaningful design, and meaningful design is giving an impact to the people in the spaces that we have designed. And so that impact could be a variety of things. It could be that they're happy, that they're successful, that they're more productive, that they're selling more products, that like I think about, you mentioned High Point College, now High Point University, and we design a lot of spaces for them, including dorms. And one of the things that we did was the most recent dorm we designed all these amenities in it for today's living. So like I think about the students who may have at one point been homesick, but because we designed kitchens, cooking kitchens into these dorms where they could get in and engage. It impacts their life. It has meaning. And suddenly maybe those kids are no longer homesick because they have an outlet for creative energy in some capacity. So could not agree more.
Good. John, another aspect of this is something that, people really don't think about: user interface. And I think that's what we're talking about in a lot of areas. That's talked about in technology all the time. You pick up your phone or you look at your computer, and the way that it interacts with you and the colors and the integration and all of that is terribly important to how you feel about what you're doing with it and how easy you're able to do things. And I think that if we in the industry talked a little bit more about user interface, maybe other people would start to recognize that home furnishings, particularly furniture, accents, accessories, all have that same kind of user interface with it, and that how people act and react to it, and how we as either designers or the folks that are in your organization, ISFD, create these things, then we could express it better. And, I know we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling later. I think that's a big part of the storytelling element.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So that brings me to a point where I'd like to ask a little bit about what a day in your life is like. So I'm going to start with Christi, because we off camera just a minute ago, we're talking a little bit about what a day in her life was like last week when you were part of a special event. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so the event was Gail Dobie's Genius Exchange, and I had the pleasure of being requested to speak as a TEDx presenter, which basically means you have less than 15 minutes to state your case. And so I spoke on team culture. It was really exciting.
Awesome.
One of my very favorite topics.
Well, it's easy to see that when you look at your website and for your organization and the videos that are on that, and watching the team members interact, even if you are watching vicariously. So let's speak to team a little bit. The day in your life with your team, how does that go for you? What's that like when you come in the door? Everybody throwing paper at you, or what are they doing?
Well, my team is my very favorite part of my job, I have to tell you. I've gone from creating and designing spaces to creating and designing a company culture, which Dawn and I have talked at great length about, which is really fun. And, next phase of life for me, which I am enjoying immensely. One of the things I love most about my day is no 2 days are ever alike. They are different every single day. And, this current pandemic and quarantine has made it look a lot different than it did prior to. Prior to, it was very fast-paced and busy, so I am embracing the quarantine pandemic as a chance to get a reset and take a pause and take a deep breath, and I have enjoyed that immensely and spent more time with my team, even though for a large part of it was remotely. It has definitely impacted us on many positive levels and has generated a lot of good out of our company in the process.
I'm going to come back to that thought and expand on that, but Dawn, what's a day in your life like? And I can see where teamwork and collaboration come into your business almost every day, every minute. You're collaborating, is that right?
Absolutely. And one of the reasons that I've been able to stay in this industry and in the kind of business that I'm in is, just as Christi said, no 2 days are ever alike. When you're working with clients who have their own ideas and their own thoughts and where things ought to go, you've really got to be able to be both manipulative in some ways to help guide them, be adaptive, and to be incredibly resilient, which is good for me because I bore pretty easily at the thought of doing the same thing over and over again. Repetitive kinds of things just want to make me curl up and cry. So, so doing that is a lot of fun. And we'll talk a little bit in a little while, I think, about some other elements of it. But I will say that I chose being in this industry because of its collaborative nature, having been in other industries that didn't feel that way. Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking to that, your approach to addressing your individual client needs, I mean, I'm sure it's a Q&A session. It's a get to know you kind of thing in both your cases. I mean, that's something you both have to share. You have to get to know a client, in some cases for the first time ever. You've never met the individual or group. Since we're still here, let's talk, if you would, Dawn, a little bit to that, addressing your clients' needs and how you approach that.
Sure. Every one of our clients, with very little exception, are in some sort of creative endeavor. We have chosen that is our path for our company. And so they might be design firms. They might be manufacturers. They might be product designers. They might be nonprofits associated with the creative industries. And so everyone needs a little something different from us. Just like in your world, there are no, okay, everybody walks this path. Whether or not you are redoing this person's living room and that person's living room, those two are completely custom. It just happens to be the living room.
Yes.
So the same thing is with us. Every client has to be customized. Every client's needs are different. And that to me is part and parcel of why I chose to really focus on the strategic marketing side. It allows me to dive very deep into their businesses if they're willing to be vulnerable enough to let us do that. And I can help them see where they need to be because they're telling me that this is their goal over here, but they're back here. If I can do my strategic marketing work, then I can actually machete down that pathway ahead of them to get them to that goal. Every other part of it is tools and tactics at that point. So it really is fun for me to be able to do that.
Wow, that was a great explanation of what you do, and I'll use that machete thing many times in the next couple of months, and I'll refer to you every time I do that. Speaking of macheteing down things and getting focused onto what the real core of a business is, you kind of have to do that, Christi, in your neck of the woods because if you don't know what the client wants, that's a desperately bad place to be when you're designing something that they have to live with every day, whether it be residential or commercial, right? Tell me what how you address your approach to clients.
Well, I'd love to touch on the fact that, first of all, Dawn is a master at her craft. She can machete any jungle ahead of you. So that I wanted to be sure to state. Much like Dawn's business, we have to do a deep dive to get to know our clients. And I no matter if that's a commercial, a showroom client, or a residential client, we have to understand what their goals are, what their desires are, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what their budgets are. You got to talk about all that stuff up front so that you really have a good understanding and you can be good stewards of both their time and their money. And then from there, every single project is different. Dawn and I have spoken on countless occasions about how our businesses parallel so regularly with so much of what we do. And, for us, one of the things that we've done is we have developed a 4-step process that everybody goes through that same process. Everybody's project is custom and everybody's end result is very different, obviously, because we have 3 channels of business and we're creating luxury homes and then we're creating retail stores and showroom environments as well as commercial environments. But every single one of those projects, no matter how different they are, all follow that 4-step structure. And that helps us be efficient and streamlined and have processes so that we can get to that end goal down that macheted path, as Dawn referenced, as quickly and as efficiently as possible so that we're meeting timelines and meeting that ever-present deadline, and then we're also staying in budget. So all those things are very important to our clients, and we put those top of mind for us as well.
And I would think that has to do a lot, too, with whatever it is that the client is going to be doing in the space that you're creating for them, whether that be having a business and operating that business to the best of their ability in the most efficient way, laid out in the most appropriate manner. All of these, that's so many things that you have to keep control over. And I commend you on doing that, number one. Number two, having a plan going in that your team is aware of is a big, big step in getting to know your clients. So compliments to you. Speaking of clients, getting to know people and protecting their voice and boosting their voice, if you will. Don, tell me a little bit about once you get to know your clients and you understand where they're coming from and you want to, say, boost their voice in a specific way to a specific audience that they're going to address. how do you play that for the client? What do you say to the client at that point to say, okay, here's what we're proposing. What do you think of this? What's your angle of approach on something like that?
Sure. We do that a lot. Because we can be going down a particular path and then have to pivot for things. And when you pivot, then you have to readdress and reassess those things. But what we really do is once the client and our team is in agreement as to what the goals are and what your timeline is to be able to get to those goals, then we're able to overlay various things like messaging that has a particular voice, a particular cadence, a particular rhythm of information flow even, whether or not that's through traditional public relations methods, whether it's through social media, whether it's a total revamp of their brand, whether it's creating them as experts in a particular field so that they can be elevated to become, as Christi has, a sought-after presenter for things and an expert in her particular realm. So once we have all gotten consensus on what the end is, then it's usually pretty easy for the client to see how we can lay out those steps. They've bought into it already. I think it's a lot like what Christi and her team do, that once they've gotten a client really comfortable with what the vision of the end result is, not necessarily what the actual result is, but the end result, then they allow you to move the way you need to move to get to that point that makes them even happier than they thought they were going to be.
Yes.
And that brings me that opportune moment to throw into between the two of you, for conversation purposes, what you feel the significance of storytelling, both in design and marketing and merchandising, has to the overall scheme of things, of your two pathways, because I know they coincide right there. That's a crossing path, if I've ever heard one. And one of the things several of my guests have said over the last year or so is that storytelling with the current generation, with the millennials and beyond, has become a huge part of how they buy things, how they look to buy things. What's the story about this? What's the story about this person who made this furniture or this company? Or, what's the story behind these people that are telling me what they're telling me? I'd love to hear your take on that. And whoever wants to start, go ahead.
Well, obviously, storytelling is incredibly important in the presentation of product, but also the inspiration and the aspiration of wanting the kind of lifestyle that is represented through the kinds of designs that Christi does or the kinds of furniture designs that ISFD members would create. And so for us, in my particular industry, we have morphed from this sort of ethereal storytelling element represented a number of years ago, and some of your listeners might remember this. The furniture industry had never done a particularly good job of telling its story until we were all shocked by that beautiful Ethan Allen commercial that came out about their British West Indies collection, and it had the salamander crawling up the post, and they were talking about how it was all infused with the flavors and the designs of West Indies, and everybody went, "Oh, are you kidding me? That's what we've been seeking all this time," and they did it in less than 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. And so there became this sort of amorphous storytelling for a while. That has gone by the wayside now. In retrospect, it was very good for creating this kind of fictionalized story or a product collection that was based on someone that didn't exist. For example, grandma's attic or whatever it happened to be. Nowadays, I think what people really want is the authenticity, to tell the story of authenticity behind all of this so that they can understand that it also represents either something that they espouse to or that they aspire to or that they want to support. And so I think that we have moved in a really good direction in telling those stories because it allows us to be transparent and genuine and, I guess for lack of a better word that I've already used, authentic in what we're doing.
authentic is a great word, don't
It's
you?
a great word. Absolutely.
Tell me about how do you get to the authentic person? If you're doing a residence, I mean, you're searching for their authentic self, because you're going to be telling their story, are you not, with a little bit of what you're doing in collaboration with the client?
Absolutely. I tell our clients before we ever even start the project, before we're contracted to do work, that our brand ethos, so to speak, when some people come to designers because they have a look. The other designers, and I consider us in this category, are the designers that really embody the personality of who lives in that home. Mm-hmm. And then tells their story. So the best compliment that we could ever get on a project, especially a residential one, is if someone were to walk into your home and say, oh my gosh, John and Shirley, this looks just like you. This is so you. That's the best compliment that we can ever get. Not that, oh, we can tell so-and-so did this project. And so, thinking about the authenticity, one of the things that I feel is really important for a home is, when we're looking at products, it's not all about the style. It's about the quality and the craftsmanship and the thought that goes into the products that are selected and the thoughtful placement of where those products are placed so that they can live their lives based on the way that they want to interact with each other and with their guests, that they have the materials that feel good when you touch them and have that quality of hand when you grab that handle or the doorknob or touch that table. And so we're looking for, back to Dawn's storytelling opportunity, we're looking for products that do tell a story. It's like we just finished a project down in the Turks, and a couple of pieces that we pulled in were antiques, not something you would typically think of to put in that kind of environment. But again, we wanted to be able to tell that story, and clients were thrilled in the end. And there was a story behind the pieces that we selected, and so they fell in love with the story behind the pieces that we selected and they ultimately used. And then that felt reflective of them because they wanted a home that didn't feel like a showroom, but felt collected and curated and global over time because they travel all over the world. And so, the storytelling for them and the reflection of their personalities was in that curation of products from all over.
That brings up another point. In the other kind of work that you do, primarily in showrooms, yes, our businesses really overlap in that particular realm, because Barbour Spangle is a bit of a master in creating not just beautiful spaces in showrooms, but creating the visual merchandising that allows for the selling to happen. And in order to do that, they have to know so much about the product, so much about the potential buyers, so much about how the sales flow can work. Mm-hmm. So they've got to be really, really tied into that. And then what we do is we overlay on top of that the story that is followed through the pathways that they've created for us. And so that's how, in the best of circumstances, a manufacturer or a brand can really leverage both the design and the marketing side as to allow us to collaborate and work together to create this seamless approach to the sales opportunity, because we're not there just to make pretty. We're not there just to talk pretty about things. Yeah. The client's end goal is to get that order and to get that placement. Yeah. And that's what Christi's team and my team ultimately are looking toward, and how do we use our best talents to get there?
Well, what you just defined was, I think, how you harmonize your creativity with the business goals of either your client or the people whose home you're creating or whose business you're building out. Wow. I didn't even have to ask that question. Thank you for doing that. That was wonderful. So that brings me to want to ask you a little bit about how things changed in the last 7 months. What's the one thing that COVID immediately affected how you do business? What's the one, I guess, the first thing that comes to mind, what's the first thing besides the shock of the whole thing and the shutting down of the country? How did that coming along, what was the number one thing that it had a way of affecting your business on? That was a tough way to ask that question, because I was trying to get to a point of, how did it affect you? in a business sense, really? Did it take longer to do things? Did things just stop cold and everybody had to rethink?
For us, because we are so heavily involved in showroom design, as Dawn mentioned, and we were literally setting up for pre-market when the governor shut NC down and we had to go into quarantine. And so because of that, for us, everything that we had currently in terms of projects on the books just kind of evaporated overnight. And then, at the beginning, it was postponed, as we all know. And so we kept thinking, okay, in a couple more weeks we'll start, and a couple more weeks we'll start. And, 3 to 4 weeks into it, we realized that wasn't going to happen. And so while that was happening, we were looking at other ways to make an impact and to also pick up other projects and shuffle our schedule so that projects that we were planning to start aftermarket could be pulled into sooner. So it had a fairly sizable impact for our company because we are so heavily market-based.
Mm-hmm.
I think for us, it was a little bit different, both professionally and with our clients. And I will say from a personal aspect, and Christy alluded to it before we jumped on the podcast, I was out of the country when a lot of the early part of COVID hit. So coming back was a bit of a challenge, just physically getting back into the country, but then the sort of shock of coming back from a place that had virtually they just weren't touched by the illness until I got off the plane in New York and saw emptiness. That personally took a bit of a toll on me. It took probably 10 days for me to get reacclimated to things. But from a business standpoint, we have been pretty fortunate with where clients have been able to hang on or see the opportunity that this has opened for them. They've been incredibly resilient. Okay, we can't go down this path, let's find another path. And they have asked us again to help them find that path. So that's been really, really good. From, I think, our personal business, the Media Matters kind of business, I think that it has actually been a good thing. It is definitely the silver lining in the black cloud for us, because it slowed all of us down long enough to take stock of everything. We were no longer just running, from client meeting to project, etc. And it has allowed us to review all of our processes and procedures and take time to make sure that they are absolutely snug and in place. So when everything gets very, very busy again, which, I truly believe they will, we'll be able to bring even sharper focus and sharper work to our clients.
You agree with that?
Oh, 100%. We have done a lot of those very same things. And another thing that we did is, and this happened in the very first week where we all started working from home, we sat down as a team on Zoom, virtually, not physically, and said, what can we do for our community? And, we wanted to be helpful and we wanted to be a positive voice in the community. So we started with literally a slogan, "See the good." And we painted it on a sheet and hung it on the side of our building, literally just old school style. And that has become kind of a rally call for High Point. And since then, it has turned into stickers and T-shirts and yard signs. And it's been a wonderful thing to witness. So, in addition to sharpening our tools in our toolbox, we've been able to do something that is going to, in my opinion, have a lasting long-term positive impact on the community. So that's exciting to see.
Well, let me say at this moment that I'm going to thank you both for being here for the first half of what will be 2 podcasts. I want the audience to be sure to stay tuned for the next installment as we continue our discussion. All things High Point, all things how are we going to come out of this COVID situation and where are we going from here, and all things design. Be sure to stay tuned for that next edition of Design Between the Lines. Design Between the Lines is produced by Element Studio with the International Society of Furniture Designers. We record in High Point, North Carolina. To find videos of these podcasts, be sure to subscribe to the International Society of Furniture Designers YouTube channel. To learn more about ISFD, visit isfd.org. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more industry stories of design between the lines.